Hey, welcome back to Stewman Rides. We're here at Chuckwalla Valley Raceway again, and this time we're going to do another instructional video, and we're going to talk about choosing reference points or finding your marks for different corners around this racetrack. Hey, welcome back to Stewman Rides, and thanks a lot for checking out my video. If you like the content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. Throw up a like if you enjoy the video and find it useful. Anyway, we're going to do an instructional video today, and we're going to talk about choosing reference points or finding your marks for different corners around a racetrack. So let's talk a little bit about reference points and what they are and how you go about choosing them. So first off, a reference point is something that you're going to use. It's a visual marker, either on the surface of the track or next to the track, something obvious that you can see that's going to help you do one of two things. It's either going to tell you that it's time to perform some sort of action. So you need to start braking here, you need to turn the bike there, that sort of thing. Or it's going to tell you where you want to actually place the bike, right? What's your location on the racetrack and where you want to locate the bike in that section of track. So that's a reference point, and it's typically best to choose reference points on the surface of the track, right? That's where you want the bike to be going, that's where you want to be looking. So if you can find reference points on the surface of the racetrack, then that's always your best bet. If there's nothing right on the surface, then sometimes you need to look next to the track. So the edge of the track, maybe there's a braking marker like we have down here going into turn one. Maybe there's a cone, maybe there's a bush or big rock, something right next to the track that you can use for a reference point to tell you where you want to locate yourself or where you want to perform some action. And then last but not least, if there's nothing next to the track, nothing on the surface of the track, or maybe you can't see the surface of the track very well, then you want to try and find something a little bit further off into the distance. So if you look behind me here, going into turn one, we have these big trees out there, right? You see those four big trees that are right behind that fence? So if I wasn't able to find something on the surface of the track, or I couldn't see the surface of the track, then I might want to use one of those four trees out there because those make pretty good reference points. A good example of that is going into the corkscrew at Laguna Seca. It's a very blind entry, right? The track kind of drops away from you and you really can't see a whole lot. And so in that corner, there's a pretty well-known oak tree that you can aim for as you come over the top of the corkscrew, and that sets you up on a really good line for the corkscrew. So let's take a look at the corkscrew at Laguna Seca from the perspective of the rider on a motorcycle. So we come up a hill, we approach the corkscrew, we're going to make a left turn into the entry of the corkscrew, past an apex on the left, and then there's a blind crest, and then there's another apex on the right. The trouble with this corner is it drops away so steeply that you can't see the curbing on the right-hand edge of the racetrack, and you want to try an apex right on that curbing to get a good line. But as you can see here, when I stop the video on the entrance to the corkscrew, you can't see in front of you, you can't see that curbing. So there's nothing on the surface of the racetrack to help you line that up. There's no skid marks, there's no cracks, there's really nothing that you can see so that you can get a good line over the top of that crest and come right next to the curbing on the downhill side of the corkscrew. So you can see the rider in front of me here has made his turn to the left and he's trying to line up the apex, but as you'll see in a little bit, I don't think he has a good reference point because he's going to run pretty wide. He's turning really hard to the left, and you'll see as the video picks up again that he's going to kind of miss that apex because it's so hard to see, right? So what you want to do actually is there's a few oak trees on the horizon that you can see here. There's a grouping of 3 trees on the left, and then there's a single oak tree on the right.
If you aim directly for that oak tree on the right, it will put you on a very good line, and you should come right next to the curbing on the downhill side of the corkscrew. So I'll start the video again so we can get a better look at this corner, what it looks like for the rider when we're moving. So now we're approaching that crest again, and as you can see, the rider in front of me is pretty wide to the left there. And if you look straight in front of me, you'll see that oak tree. I'm lined up, pointed almost perfectly straight at that oak tree, the one to the right. And as we start the video again, you'll see that the rider in front of me is going to run pretty wide of that curbing on the left. And I'm going to come right next to the curbing and hit a pretty good apex. So it's just an example of when you don't have anything that you can use on the surface of the track. Sometimes you have to look a little bit further into the distance to find a good reference point that you can use to line up a blind corner or any corner where there's really no good reference points on the racetrack itself.
So that's the idea behind reference points. You want to try and choose reference points that are very easily seen, very visible while you're riding at speed. If it's too small or it's hard to see, then it's a bit difficult to pick it up when you're riding a motorcycle at high speed through a corner. Let's talk about finding some reference points for this set of corners, turns 1 and 2 here at Chuckwalla. So first thing you want to do is you have to choose your line first, right? You need to know where exactly you want to place the bike, where you want to perform those actions like braking, where you want to turn the motorcycle, and where you want to actually locate the motorcycle on the track, right? So you got to figure that stuff out first. If you haven't seen it already, there's a pretty good video on my channel about choosing a line and some of the decisions that you make when you actually choose your line through the corner. So once you kind of figured out, okay, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to be doing through this particular corner, then you got to try and start finding reference points along that path. The first one that you really want to look for is typically a braking marker, right? Where do I need to start braking for this corner? Sometimes you can use braking markers like they have here on the front straight at Chuck, right? So we have these 1, a 2, and a 3 board as you approach this corner, and you can use those to tell you when you want to start braking. You can also use those to tell you where you want to turn the motorcycle in. So I like to actually turn my bike in just between the 3 and the 2 boards there as we approach this set of corners, and that sets me up pretty good. So my intended line through this set of corners, turns 1 and 2 here at Chuckwalla, is I want to try and straighten out turn 1 as much as I can, but I do want to kind of cheat to the left just a little bit so that I can set up a good line through turn 2. So you really want to start the drive through this section of track starting with turn 2, right? So anyway, so I'm going to try and straighten this out. I want to cheat a little bit to the left, and then I'm going to turn in to the right, and I'm going to apex near the cone, right? So that's my intended line. I've already chosen that, and then I got to start looking for reference points along that path. So the obvious stuff, right, is you have the curbing here in turn 1, right? So you have a cone set up for the apex. It's a pretty good spot to come close to the curbing. And then I know that I want to kind of cheat to the left just a little bit, right? And it just so happens that there's a great visual reference as I do that on the motorcycle, and it's these set of cracks that kind of run parallel to the racetrack. So you got this big black crack here that runs across the track, and then we have this set of cracks here that kind of has an intersection, and it's pretty obvious, right? So you can see this as you're traveling at high speed on your motorcycle, right? So as you approach this corner and you're coming down in here, it's really easy to spot this set of cracks at the speed that you're traveling. So I use these to tell me, number 1, where to locate the bike. So I want to put my tires kind of right next to this set of cracks, right, just to the right of it. And it's also a really good spot for me to turn in, right? So if I turn the bike aggressively right at this set of cracks, then I'm going to hit an apex that's pretty close to that cone. In this corner, that cone's actually in a pretty good spot, and I'm going to use it for my apex reference point. So that's where I want to come closest to the curbing, is right where you see that cone. Right? The next thing I need is an exit reference point to tell me where I want to end up. It gives me also something to look for. As I approach the apex, I want to try and pick my eyes up and start looking for my exit. So if I have a reference point on the exit of the corner, then that's going to help draw me out of the corner and keep my eyes ahead of me and help me slow things down a little bit, right? So in this corner, there's some curbing on the outside of the track. Where that curbing ends is a good reference point for where you want to exit. So the big thing to remember here is, number one, you want to find your line first, and then you want to try and find reference points along that path that are going to help you either place the bike in a location or tell you where you need to do things. So again, in this example, I have a set of cracks that not only tell me I want to be near those cracks, right, bike placement, but they also tell me that's where I want to turn the motorcycle in to try and get a good apex, right? So that's a good example of choosing some reference points for a particular corner. We're going to take a look at a couple other reference points around this track just to give you a better idea of some different examples of things that you can use.
So let's take a look at some more examples of reference points that I use around Chuckwalla. First off, we're coming through turn 1 and 2, and here you can see that set of cracks that I talked about earlier in the video. So I'm going to use those to tell me, number one, where to place the bike, and number two, I want to turn it in right next to those cracks to try and hit a good apex and get a good line off of this corner. So once I come past that set of cracks, I'm going to look for my apex cone and come past that, and now we're heading into turn 3. You have another apex cone that you can use here. It's in a pretty good spot. And then on the exit of turn 3, it's really important to have an exit reference point, or something that you can drive towards coming off the corner. And in this case, that corner worker station off in the distance makes a pretty good reference point. It's very large, it's very easy to see. As you're coming close to the apex, you can pick your eyes up and try and spot that corner worker station from quite some distance away. So that's what I use for my exit reference point coming out of turn 3. It's a little distance off the track, but it still works pretty well as a reference point. So here coming into turn 4, I have another reference point that I use, and it's this crack. So I use this mostly just to locate myself. I don't want to get close to the curbing too early in this corner. I want to stay out a little distance away from the curbing on the entry, kind of bring the bike over towards the apex a little bit later in this corner. So I use this crack that's running parallel to the curbing. I want my tires actually on the right-hand side of that crack. And right where the crack ends is where I want to start, kind of cross right over that spot and start heading towards the curb. So I'm not making any steering changes. This is just kind of a validation of the line that I'm on. So it's telling me that, you know, if I cross over right at the end of that crack, that's kind of where I want to be, and it just validates that I made an accurate turn in. So once we come past that, we're going to go through the rest of turn 4 here. We let the bike run out wide. We turn in to turn 5 here, right at the end of the curbing that you can see on the right-hand side. So there's the white tip there. The end of the curbing is painted white, and right where that white tip is where I want to turn the bike again to the left. I'm already leaned over, but I give it an additional steering input to bring it back to the left, start heading for the apex in turn 5. So we come past the cone there, that's our apex marker. Reference point on the exit is the corner worker station. Here coming into turn 6, we have these skid marks, and these skid marks actually head straight towards the curb. And in this corner, I actually want to apex a little bit early, well before the cone that's placed. So right where these skid marks actually hit the curbing is pretty much where I want to apex. So you'll see as we start the video back up, I come pretty close to the curb, right where those skid marks are. Coming through turn 7, we have this big black spot in the track. That's another locator for me. I actually want to be just to the outside of that spot, to the left of it. Keeps me off from getting to the curbing a little bit too soon. You really want to late apex this corner. You actually apex it well past the cones that are placed. So this black spot helps me stay outside a little bit longer, and then I can start heading towards the curbing once I come past this spot to hit a nice late apex. So as the video starts up again, hopefully I'll get somewhat close to the apex. There we are, quite some distance past those cones. So coming through the slower section of track, we're using the cones through that right-hander, again apexing past the cones here. Through turn 10, we're apexing past the cones again, onto the back straight using that left-hand side of the racetrack as a reference point. Turning in here, we're going to turn in right towards the end of the curbing, and then coming down the hill, we have another big black spot on the racetrack that you can see there. It's a little bit hard to see in this video. It doesn't look like the contrast. Maybe it's just the way the sun's hitting it, but this black spot here is really super obvious when you're on the bike. So I use that. I want to let the bike run to the outside of that spot. Coming into the bowl, there's an early apex there where that cone's laying down. Let the bike run out a little bit towards the middle. Come back towards the second apex. Coming down into this turn here, I use that white tip on the right-hand side as my turn-in point. So right where the curbing starts, where it's painted white there, I want to tip the bike to the left. And that's my reference point for where to turn in there. Come apex a little bit before the cones there, sends you out a little bit wide. Coming into this corner, there's this pretty dark colored crack that runs parallel to the racetrack. That's a good marker for me to where I want to start turning in. So I'm going to use that to turn the bike in to the left. And I'm going to apex near the cones, if I didn't have a bike in the way, that is. And then we're going to come into the final sequence of corners we call patience. So an early apex, and then there's this crack right here that runs parallel to the racetrack. I want to be just to the outside of that crack, keep me off the curbing a little bit so I can set up a late apex. So I'm just to the outside of that crack through that section of the track, apexing past the cones here, and then on to the front straight.
I think that'll do it for this video. Hopefully it helped you out, and if it did, please subscribe to the channel. Remember that when you're choosing reference points, that it's always best to try and use something that's on the surface of the racetrack. If there's nothing right on the surface, maybe something next to the track, and if there's nothing right next to the track, then maybe something a little bit further off into the distance. So thanks a lot for watching Stewman Rides. Like I said, if you feel a video was useful, please subscribe to my channel, throw up a like on the video, and I'll try and keep the videos coming for you. All right, thanks a lot for watching Stewman Rides.